I'd like to begin the afternoon program by inviting up Helen Carey.
Okay, for some reason I always get asked to speak after lunch. I think it's probably because I'm probably one of the noisiest, and so there's no sleeping on my shift, folks. So welcome. The model of doing for people with ALS, MND. Thank you for having me here to speak. I spoke a few years ago within Brussels, and I presented a lot of evidence for how exercise, mild to moderate, for people with MND is positive. And what I'm going to do now is show you the end of that journey. This has been a 5-year journey, PhD study, and I'm going to fit 5 years into 15 minutes. If you want me to bore you senseless, I can do that until Sunday. So please do shout me if you've got any questions. I'm an occupational therapist with many, many years of experience. And I was asked very often by people with MND, how much should I do? We didn't really know the answer to this question. So what we're going to do today is I'm actually going to answer that question, how people with MND should do this. But what I'm going to focus on most is a model that's been devised from this research that shows how occupational therapists can enable this. Very quickly, because I've got a poster at the symposium that goes in more detail about the research, but I want to just go through the research very briefly because it'll be the context for the model. 5 years study of fellowship funding, £55,000, a case study approach of 6 participants. Now the positivist researchers amongst you, the cynics, will go, how can you generalise from just 6 participants? But those of you that know about case study approach will know that you look in huge depth about each of those 6 people. So that allows for more generalisability. A mixed method study, and each of these people received 6 weeks intervention, a 6-week period of intervention. Now, at this point, let me just give you the current climate within the UK. Within the UK, there's a lot of criticism that occupational therapy tends to be more reductionist in its manner. We're obviously short-staffed, there's a lot of pressures within us, and this intervention isn't Einstein. It did the pure occupational therapy philosophy with patients. So we looked at what the evidence was for mild to moderate exercise, and we literally translated that in everyday doing. People used the activity that they choose. It was client-centred, so they were in control from day one. They chose the activity that they wanted to do, and they were in complete control with the occupational therapist, just coaching, guiding, and facilitating. It was in their own context, not in clinics, not in hospital departments, not in centres. It was gardening in their home, running in their area. It was playing wheelchair tennis in their area. It was sorting out the wardrobes in their own home. It was their own context. And it was in a rehabilitation framework. There's no compensation within this. It was all challenging to a mild to moderate effect. So, very briefly, and it is very brief this, but the Canadian Occupational Performance Measure was used as well as the ALS FRS, and I'm just going to show you the Canadian Occupational Performance Measure here, and you can see this is 6 weeks following the intervention, and you can see for each of the case studies a huge improvement in their performance and also their own evaluation of their performance. Each of the 6, all with different forms of MND ALS, and we've said how personalised that is while we've been here, but each of them, a huge difference. But then look when the occupational therapist walks away. When the occupational therapist walks away, now this is 3 months following the occupational therapist walking away after 6 weeks, and you can see we can see 3 case studies there that have deteriorated in terms of performance and satisfaction in performance, but 1 has stayed the same positive effects of after the intervention, and 2 have continued to improve. Now, again, I can immediately sense that you're thinking, this is a progressive condition. You would expect people to have deteriorated over a 3-month period. and I can go in more depth individually with you and at the poster, but this study did accommodate for this being a progressive condition. So I'd like to look at those results of thinking that is all much of a muchness, if you like. So, here's the model that has been devised. So, as you can see, we love a circle in a model, don't we? So it's a circle. So we have enjoyment in doing in the central. Enjoyment was the key to the intervention. Enjoyment is delivered by these 4 things. Okay? Reminiscence, pushing self, impact on others, and motivation. And then outside that box, a can-do attitude, feeling alive, having control, and relationship with the occupational therapist. Each of these subcompartments is achieved by those 3 things. So those 3 things deliver the compartment. So enjoyment in the centre, achieved by those 4 things, and there are 4 subcompartments delivered by each of those 3 things within them. And I'm going to give you, hold on to your seats, a running account of that model now. Enjoyment, as I said, I've perseverated on this quite a bit, but enjoyment is the key. I think as therapists we have often forgotten how to help our patients enjoy things. Stephen spoke today about having to find a snapshot of 5 minutes of enjoyment. Rather than us looking on life effects and survival, enjoyment was the key. People enjoyed pushing themselves to a mild to moderate effect. They enjoyed challenging themselves. How did we do this? The activities that they did were reminiscent activities. There is lots of evidence to suggest that people with MND ALS have previously been very active. We can talk for hours about metabolism and all sorts, but these are active people that then receive this diagnosis. By doing activity to a mild to moderate challenge, what they do is they key into how they used to work, how they used to behave, how they used to challenge, and are then able to intuitively modulate this so that they then continue to challenge themselves. And this is where some of the positive effects come from, at a mild to moderate level. So I found by session 2, session 3, people were quite comfortable challenging themselves. They enjoyed pushing themselves. They enjoyed having the confidence to be able to push themselves. And what also happened is positive emotional contagion. Very simply put, that when they were pushing themselves and enjoying it, people around them were seeing them enjoying themselves. And that cascaded back to them continue to push. So the 3 people that continued to do well after the occupational therapist walked away were the 3 people that continue to push to a mild to moderate level. Okay, a can-do attitude. Somebody else this morning talked about hope. It's a progressive condition, but in this framework, we're believing strongly that hope can be communicated in a realistic aspect, to be able to enjoy doing. I say in a realistic aspect, but a lot of the conversation throughout this intervention is not about weaknesses or what somebody can't do or what they shouldn't do. It was like, let's give this a go. That accomplishment was key as well to seeing positive effects. There wasn't any compensation of activity, trying to do things differently. That was only used when there was an absence of ability. This is trying to push through for people to do in as much as they can normally. And what tended to happen over the 6 weeks is the people formed an identity of, I can this, give this a go. There's lots of evidence that people that after they've had the diagnosis of motor neuron disease tend to stop doing as much. They tend to be wrapped up in a bit more cotton wool and tend not to challenge themselves. This is the first time somebody had come by and said, come on, let's give this a go. Let's push ourselves a little further. And we've seen that there were positive effects from this. We occupational therapists talk a lot, we're obsessed with occupational flow. We talk a lot about occupational flow. The non-occupational therapist amongst you will see occupational flow as when you're really enjoying doing an activity and you lose all sense of time. You are lost within that activity. And what this framework does is encourages occupational therapists to help in every session that they do with their clients achieve an occupational flow. The true secret is then how when you walk away, the client is able to continue that occupational flow themselves. And that is what happened with 3 of the participants. Again, normality was a huge thing. So being able to guide to a normality of a task rather than compensating for that task. And also, and this may be controversial to some amongst you, but actually encouraging tiredness. There is nothing wrong with being tired. And I think tiredness has become to have a bit of a negative connotation within rehabilitation. But actually, what these people enjoyed was actually feeling tired. They enjoyed doing, and then they felt tired. And they said, you know, it's been quite a while since I've actually felt tired after doing something, and that felt good. So what I put here is that we should embrace positive tiredness rather than trying to minimise any effect of tiredness. Freedom. We live in a very risk-averse society. Certainly healthcare within the UK is very concerned about occupational therapists deliver or attending to deliver in quite a risk-averse fashion. Some of the occupational therapists that I work with recoiled in horror at the fact that I was running across Llandudno prom. Lots of you don't know where Llandudno is. Believe you me, it's a long prom. With somebody with mild to moderate symptoms of motor neurone disease. That I was actually gardening with shears and an axe and all sorts. Their own context and the balance of occupation was really important. They all chose leisure activities. Now, the relationship with the occupational therapist. This is the first time somebody talked in terms of can do. This is the first time somebody said, you can have a go at doing this. The adaptability of the therapist, as we know, is really important. That's obvious. But also, we didn't talk in terms of giving somebody advice on how they can do it. The occupational therapist actually did it with them, and this truly helped their modulation. So that's the model. Has it changed practice? I can talk about my own area in North Wales. This, and only in the short 2 months since this model has been made, we've already made particular gains. Therapy intervention is now delivered through a reablement rehabilitation model for people with mild to moderate symptomology rather than a palliative model. Enjoyment is the focus of our intervention goals. We do with our clients rather than talk about doing. We're using assistants, we're using volunteers to be able to do that. And we're using much more flexibility in our provision of what people actually want. So let's answer that question. How much do I do? Now when I see a patient and they have mild to moderate symptomologies, I'll say, challenge yourself to a mild to moderate level. Do anything you want to do to a challenge to a mild to moderate level and enjoy doing it. And I'll do anything that I can to help you do that. I'd like to say thank you to Fluid Branch of Motor Neurone Disease, the fellowship funding, but most of all I'd like to say what a privilege it's been to work with the 6 case studies that I worked with. This was very much a person-centred research journey, and we delivered that research together. And I hope that we're able to make meaningful difference to therapy intervention from this model. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. And this is now open for questions.
Peggy Allred, Cedars-Sinai, Los Angeles. Thank you so much. This is great. I think we all look for ways to advise and inspire our patients to be active, and I think focusing on what they can do instead of cautioning what they shouldn't do is a fantastic approach. Can you speak to the 3 that declined or that disengaged from the program, and sort of what you think was going on with those, and what happened?
Yeah, I think they had relied on the occupational therapist. As an occupational therapist, you feel that you're empowering, you're guiding and facilitating. And I think probably with those 3, they had confidence in challenging themselves when the occupational therapist was present. When the occupational therapist walked away, they didn't have the confidence. I believe that if we'd had a few more weeks of intervention, we'd have probably got there, and they'd have been. So the success was when they were able to do it off their own back without the occupational therapist being there. Family and friends have a lot to do with it, and I think certainly within our area we're looking at having volunteers, students even, and assistants of being able to carry on helping that when the occupational therapist obviously can't be there every session for such a long period of time. I think also within the UK lots of intervention programmes of 6 weeks, 6-week duration, and I think it also puts a great deal of thought in the fact of realistically how much can you do in 6 weeks. For 3 of the case studies it was successful within 6 weeks, but obviously I think these other 3 needed a bit more time.
Any other questions?
Congratulations. I've been dreaming of seeing this kind of work. I find ALS patient has this perfectionist personality. They always want to do. And I often wonder whether it's because their physical activity is more than what their biologic allow them. So if they're perfectionist and if they want to, they have the drive to do things. When they have the illness, if we can change their mindset into, I can call it drive, to use their brain to enjoy what the world can offer.
Brilliant.
It can stop thinking about the disease.
Brilliant, that's exactly right. If I had more time, I could go into, there's quite a lot of psychology that came within this.
Yes.
Use the 5-factor personality test. We can talk a lot about, there is certainly looking, there is a certain personality type, quite often within ALS, and also the interaction with the therapist as well. It was certainly trying to get that drive, and I would be so brave as to say that drive back. I think a lot of the people that I have treated with ALS MND have been people that do drive themselves quite hard. They receive a diagnosis and they decondition quite quickly because all of a sudden they're not, we think we're encouraging them to do, but we're actually not. And what this intervention actually did, by week 2, week 3, they were achieving their goals. Now that wasn't all because of exercise. That is because we'd encourage them to be able to get that drive and that passion to do.
I can get you a few of those lung survivors. They are writers. They're actually contributing so positively to society. I can get them linked to you.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I have a question, but we don't have any time, so I'll talk to you later. Thank you.